Only Marc Marquez could steal the show by finishing a MotoGP race in 7th. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. You know it's going to be an interesting one when the race itself isn't even the opening topic. Hello everybody, welcome to episode 471 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. Glad you could join us as ever on Motorsport 101. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about MotoGP San Marino Grand Prix at the Misano circuit. Marco Simoncelli, we miss him very much. This was a strange MotoGP weekend, let me tell you. This was a weekend where the racing felt like the sideshow. It's a really, really peculiar one, and we'll get into a lot of detail about it in a minute because there's potentially some big ramifications that are on the line regarding, and you can probably guess this, Japanese motorsport. In shocking news, if you've been listening to the show regularly over the last, year and a half at this point. We'll have to wait and see. But let's get into it. Let's go around the horn as ever. First up, RJ O'Connell. Good to see you, big man. How's it going?
Great to be back. And good news, everybody. If you're worried, no, we don't have any mortifying accidents to talk about this weekend. Thank heavens.
God. Thank God. That is automatically an improvement on last week. Yeah. Although almost match in terms of raw drama. Isn't that right, Cam Buckley?
I'm just here so I won't get fined.
Biggest Honda fan in the world is about to mentally explode.
I had to water cool my hands typing the set list up for this show.
We need to hold you in the garage here for a bit, and we need to let the traffic work its way through before we send you out in this hot lap, partner.
Yeah, this is a wild one, and if anybody knows this setup for the podcast, well, if you don't, because every show is somebody's first, I'm a pretty big Marc Marquez fan. I love Marquez. I love how he rides a bike. I've always been enamored to him since he got to, even before he got to the top flight. God, he was in Moto 2. I was blown away by this dude. Cam is a devout, every week church-sitting member of the Church of Honda.
My first vehicle was an old Honda motorcycle. It's in better shape than most of the 213Vs have been this year because they keep ending up in gravel or air fences or grass.
Well, the good news is they all came home this weekend. That's a plus, right?
Yeah. I feel like we're still waiting for some of them. In fact, one of them never even got going.
And from my own experience, anytime I've been aware of MotoGP, there's never been a Repsol Honda bike that has not been at the front most of that time for reasons that we'll get into. That has changed. And also from the moment I first saw him on a MotoGP bike, Marc Marquez's riding style has been just the kind of stuff that I tell non-motorcycle riders about. I liken him to baseball legend Mike Trout, who has now wasted like the last handful of years in his prime hurt and on a team that is going nowhere in a hurry.
Yeah, that pretty much fits the bill perfectly, RJ.
More or less.
That one spot on.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later.
Congratulations, yes. Repsol Honda. You are now the Angels.
And you don't have a Shohei Ohtani in the woodwork.
No, you do. No, you absolutely do not. If anything,
and then he'll leave you too.
Yeah, probably at the end of this season anyway.
To go ride on a blue bike.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that's good for you, Trey, if that deal does go through.
As a Dodgers fan, I have no complaints about this situation whatsoever. Mookie for MVP. Anyway, we'll be talking a little bit about that. Obviously, Marc Marquez and how he became the dominant show of this weekend and how he got most of the media center in fits, plus some behind-the-scene chats as a guy that is lucky enough to be in the Racist Slack group regarding MotoGP. Obviously, I won't give away obviously the big secrets, but I'll let you in on some little tidbits on that here and there. As I listened to some of the big dudes cook about this, and it was fascinating to watch in the background, let me tell you. Of course, We're also talking about the race itself. Jorge Martin, by the way, absolutely dominated the weekend. Maximum points, all 37 of them, would comfortably win the sprint in the Grand Prix itself. And just like that, he's kind of back in the title picture again.
Distantly.
A little bit.
He's waving. Kind of. He's waving in a field in the distance. Hey, remember me?
Yeah, he's barely back within a race weekend, which I guess is good.
It only took Pecco Bagnaia nearly dying and then riding hurt.
So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk a little bit about KTM's current situation in their silly season market. Because hey, isn't it nice when Dani Pedrosa comes back?
It is.
Uncle Danny was back, and Uncle Danny rode very fucking well, and he's kind of made everybody at KTM look a little bit silly this weekend. We'll get into some of that a little bit later on as well. But basically, you can find us, and I'll keep this real quick because Cam is chomping at the bit here. Motorsport101.com is the website. Patreon.com/Motorsport101 if you want to follow us on there and back us financially if you really, really want to. Includes early access and potentially live listening as well if you are that way inclined. Social media wise, you can find us at motorsport_101 on Twitter. You can follow us at motorsport101 pod on Instagram. And if you want to follow us personally, you can at Dre_WTF1 at RJ O'Connell and C Buckley 917. You can follow us all individually on there. So right after this, let's talk about the Marc Marquez show.
This weekend was dominated by Marc Marquez, as it often is, but now especially more than ever. Speed Week, a Red Bull-owned publication, originally reported that Marc was on the brink of a switch to Gresini Racing Team for the 2024 season, breaking off his current contract with Honda Motor Company early. The optics behind the potential move were sketchy until the Misano test on Monday after the Grand Prix, where Marquez openly admitted for the first time that he could leave at the end of this 2023 season, and he'll know for sure by Sepang in November. I did also like this quote from a recent Marquez interview with DAZN's Spanish Wing, where he said, before all this test went down, I know where I'll be racing in 2024. As of today, I have a contract with Honda, but they've put my name on all the bikes. Someone will get it right, won't they? Obviously,
openly trolling everybody now.
Openly, just winding them up little by little. Do you buy the rumors behind a Marquez departure? Should he move? Well, let's cut to the chase. Gentlemen, y'all cook for 30 minutes.
I'll start this one just to give Cam a bit more time to breathe. This, I'll cut to the overall chase quickly here. Marc Marquez is clearly trolling the media and the major personalities within this. I think any intelligent bike fan or any intelligent sports journal or any intelligent fan in general could point this out. He is trolling the ever-loving shit out of people. The fact that he was posting memes, like the joke about it's the Spanish. I found this out. It was the Spanish meme on Thursday he posted about how Lionel Messi could never leave Barcelona, obviously in Spanish. And Marquez is laughing in the background as that quote plays because the story goes that, Lionel Messi was a Barcelona loyalist to the core until Barcelona ran out of money. Because, hey, amazingly, paying your franchise payer nearly £500 million in the long run might not be financially a good idea. Who knew? And obviously Marquez is a big Barcelona fan, which doesn't exactly help either. And as RJ pointed out earlier, he has basically done exactly what he mentioned to the DAZN, where he's largely just trolled the ever-loving shit out of anyone that's asked him questions about his future to the media, which has just been... It's very un-Marquez-like, is what I would say, because Marquez until now has been very careful in talking about his future. He's largely kept himself to himself. He's been if you want to be cynical, you could say he's been reading the company lines. I've got a contract for next year. I'm not going anywhere, etc., etc. This weekend was different. This weekend felt different. And I'll let you in a little secret. The part of the script that RJ wrote out, I wrote after the race on Sunday. the situation changed after the Misano test, because, and Cam, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Misano was the first time Marquez has publicly acknowledged on the record that he could leave Honda.
That is correct. It's the first time where he has said anything other than, I have a contract with Honda for next year, and basically left it at that.
Right.
And that was with good reason, because, well, the bike is shit. The 2024 bike is shit. First off, in a decision that I can't quite piece together in my mind, you may have noticed the last couple races, Alex Rins's bike has been running their previous 2023 Aero. Well, that's because with Alex Rins leaving, keep in mind, Alex Rins has not ridden this bike for months because he destroyed his leg earlier this season.
Mm-hmm. Back at Mugello.
They don't want Rins leaving with any secrets. What secrets is he going to bring to Yamaha? Congratulations, Alex Rins. You've traded garbage for trash. Yamaha were pants this weekend, too.
They were worse than Honda, which is saying something.
Yeah. And then Honda locked both Mark and Mir out of the data of Brattle's 2024 prototype. Wouldn't let them look at the data for their new bike.
Wait a minute, Cam, pause. Marc Marquez still has a contract for Honda next year. Why would they want to lock a rider who's out of contract, out of that confidential data, if they know he's going to be riding for them next year?
Because they're scared shitless.
Yeah, I was literally about to say, there's no way they would lock him out unless they're shit scared he leaves at the end of the season. There's no other feasible reason. Like, there is no logical reason why they would ever lock their star rider out of reading Stefan Bradl's data. I can't think of a possible conceivable way or reason to justify that. They have to know in their contract there has to be some kind of clause where Marquez can walk away at the end of the year. There has to be. Like, Honda might have just given the game away without even realizing.
Yeah, because he's trying to help you fix it. All the Honda riders are unified in their criticism of the bike. It has no rear grip. No. They come out of a corner and it's spinning its rear tire all the way down the straight. Well, you know a little thing about a MotoGP bike, about 80% of that, rear tire and how it works, the rear tire is down to your engine characteristics. Well, Honda didn't have their 2024 engine here. They might not have their 2024 engine for the Valencia test.
How?
They might not have it until the preseason February test in 2024 itself.
You're giving yourself one test to homologate your engine.
Dre. Honda Motor Company is worth 61 billion United States clams.
Does that include the tip?
Is that a lot?
That's a few McChickens.
I'll buy a few Xbox 360s.
They were unable to even get a fucking engine prototype to a test just to try. Tell you what about Yamaha, at least they're trying. The bar is nowhere.
You can't accuse Yamaha of at least not trying.
Yeah. Fabio Quartararo may have torn them a new one and said, I expected much more from this test. Because this is more an overarching criticism of Japan in motorcycle racing right now. But you're the Honda Motor Company. And they don't call it the Honda Motor Company for nothing. And you couldn't get your motor to the test to try. You might not even have it for another 8 months. While your star rider is on the fence about leaving. A couple months ago, it looked like Marc was just going to have to suck it up and deal with it. By all accounts, he's got options. And they had 12 months more to get a new engine into the bike. I mean, let alone all the other problems with the bike right now. But they've had longer. But Marc gave them the ultimatum 12 months ago. Look, I busted myself on this bike, and I've got the scars to prove it. Now it's up to you to bust your ass to give me a bike I can win on, a bike that I can work with.
I'm not here to finish in 10th.
Marc Marquez does not arrive to a MotoGP racetrack to finish 10th. He has 8 world championships to prove that. And they have nothing to show for it. They got on the 2024 bike, again, missing its intended engine. And they're all just saying it has all the same problems as the current bike. They didn't fix anything. God. What do I follow that up with?
Let me just give you the rundown of what Honda did this past weekend in Misano before the test. Marc Marquez finished 7th. Taka Nakagami and Stefan Bradl finished outside the points as 2 last-place riders. And who was riding the other LCR Honda? Why, that's Takumi Takahashi, who a month ago tied the record for the most overall wins at the Suzuka 8 Hours. He wasn't fast enough to qualify!
He literally qualified outside 105% and was not allowed.
Yeah.
And was not allowed to continue on the weekend.
They let Christophe Paulson race!
Oh my God.
At this very track as well. I remember it like it was yesterday.
I mean, props to them for upping their standards, I guess. But yeah,
guys,
it's not good. It's not good.
I expect nothing, and I am in a glass case of disappointment. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting them to overturn and create a Ducati killer overnight. And that should not be the expectation.
Give them something.
But there is nothing here. There's nothing here for them to try. It doesn't seem like they care whether Marquez walks or not. The greatest rider to ever suit up in HRC colors and stay there. And you can't even get it up to just give him something to try. Forget the riders. What is this doing to team morale in that garage?
It must be catastrophic at this point.
I mean, Marc Marquez was tying that bike into knots to finish 7th.
He rode out of his skin this weekend. He was incredible.
I mean, we're going to get to, like, the whole top 8 can held their head very high in the way they rode. But Marc Marquez, 22 seconds ahead of the next Honda on the road. And having to just subjugate the bike into corners to make it do what he needed it to do to get it to go quickly. Remember what I said last year when this thing turns in installments? There was one where he basically had to lean the bike over 3 different instances into the corner.
Yeah.
To keep it from
my man
low
is
siding.
cornering on like a PlayStation 2 D-pad.
Hey, that's in some instances that's the fastest way to drive in GT3.
No,
they're beyond the stage of fucked. And I'm gonna take off. I'm gonna leave my 4-wheeled Honda badge on my chest. I'm gonna rip off the 2-wheeled one for a minute. I hope he leaves.
Wow.
I hope Marquez walks because he deserves better. And if that's not going to wake up Honda, might as well just go home and stay there. If Honda does not race, there is no Honda. That's what Mr. Honda said a very, very long time ago. It doesn't feel like they're racing right now.
I mean, first of all, that's the longest note sheet that Cam has ever written on an M101 script. I'm very proud of him for that.
I need a water cooler for my keyboard.
And he's not wrong in anything he said. Like, this is, like, I find it baffling that Honda showed Marc Marquez the biggest commitment it has ever given to a MotoGP rider. They gave him a 4-year, $100 million plus contract.
9 figures. They gave him
the biggest contract in the history of motorcycle racing.
They gave him the kind of money that American sport ball players are just like, that's an above average contract.
Yeah, that's like mid-level in the NBA these days. Like, it is stupid money. In MotoGP terms, I'll put it into perspective for you. That contract is twice the yearly amount Ducati paid Jorge Lorenzo when they signed him in 2017.
And that was picking up a 5-time world champion to try and drag a improving, but still nowhere near what they have become.
Yeah, you could make an
argument to the promised land.
You could make an argument that at the time Lorenzo was the best bike rider on the planet, and I wouldn't laugh him out of the room. It was. Like, Honda paid him twice as much. That was the biggest show of commitment it had ever given a rider.
You know what? But you know what, Dre? It was easy when they could hand him a shit bike and Mark would just manhandle the thing to crushing the field. You've
read my shit for years, Cam. Like,
indeed.
I put the warning signs out during 2019. I was like, this is no functional way to run a team when Marc Marquez is putting up a 400-point season and Jorge Lorenzo, one of the 5 or 6 greatest bike riders to ever walk this earth, can barely get into the points on a weekly basis, who was so disillusioned with the state of bike racing, he faked a retirement to quit.
Trey, Honda are quite literally running out of bodies to throw at the problem. That's why they had to put Takumi Takahashi on the bike. And they really didn't have many other options besides maybe Nagashima, who probably would have been a better fit. But then we got to reward a guy for winning the Suzuka 8 Hours.
But they couldn't bring Nagashima because he was still stuck in Japan. They couldn't fly him out that quick. That was the whole reason they couldn't get him over there. Shout out to
Honda's got money. They could start cloning dudes.
Like,
put Asimo on the bike.
Yeah, they can clone dudes, but they can't even get a initial prototype of their 24 engine to the track for people to try.
You're Honda. You put the prototype of your GT500 Super Solid race car on the track this past week.
You have, in my opinion, the most naturally talented MotoGP rider the sport has ever seen, and you're on the brink of losing him a year early. The only man in the last decade.
Dre, they had a legitimate argument that you had the best rider lineup in all of motorcycle racing going into this year. Who was the outlier? Taka Nakagami, who is like upper mid. Alex Rins finished last year hotter than the surface of the sun. He won a race and then the bike folded him like a papadilla.
Alex Rins has been a top 3 runner in this championship before. Top 3.
Johan Mir is a world champion. And the guy who was famous for bringing the bike home and consistency. He's finished, 3 races this year?
He wasn't here this weekend because he's still recovering from injury.
This weekend he was back, but even still, it was, he's had 3 Grand Prix finishes in, I want to say, 13 rounds this year. It's like we said going into this year, Honda didn't have an excuse anymore when it came to rider quality. They had 3 of the 5 best riders on the planet under their roster, and they have actually been even worse than they were last year.
Catastrophically. This is last year, there was something to work with. I mean, at the end of last year, Mark was in a position where he could rip results out of the bike trying hard enough.
He was regularly in the top 6 still. This is worse. This is I'm clinging on to dear life to stay in the points.
Yeah, he's having to take undue risk to the point where, look, if Mark just stands the bike up and just gets it home, he's outside the top 10. There is no in between. It's either riding the thing so hard that he's practically crashing the thing every corner, or he's out of the top 10. At some races, out of the points. I mean, last race, he barely scraped a couple points.
How is Honda not at panic stations right now?
And it's just there's no tug on the other end of the rope.
You need to have every single person in your motorsport department on this. He is the face of your entire motorsport division. He is a transcendent star. Like, he is the best thing we've had since Valentino. Not even close. No one else ever got... Like, Fabio Quartararo is an incredibly likable young man, a world champion, and the Gen X superstar.
Extraordinary motorcycle rider.
He is the Gen Z superstar that MotoGP has needed for a long time. He does like 30% of the social media numbers that Marc Marquez does. Marquez is a superstar. Like, he is the nearest we've had to Valentino since. Honda needs to be putting every possible resource it has towards fixing this problem. Otherwise, from a rider talent standpoint, they will never be this good again, ever. I cannot stress this enough. Marc Marquez is, for me, the second greatest bike rider of all time. He rewrote the book on how to ride a motorcycle. You are on the brink of losing him, you're on the brink of losing another world champion, and you've already lost a top 5 rider in the sport in Alex Rins to go to your direct rival. What does that say about you? Going from Honda to Yamaha is unthinkable in MotoGP. It's the devil's work. No one does that. Valentino was the only guy who has ever done that, and he did it as a fuck you to Honda. He did it to intentionally hurt
them. When people do this? As a fuck you walking out the door.
No one does that. You do not cross the battle lines in Japan from one side to the other unless you do so out of spite, which is what
Even
Valentino
in car
Rossi
racing, like going from Honda to Toyota or vice versa is not common, as RJ will attest to.
It's treason in that part of the world. You do not do that. Like, Valentino Rossi 20 years ago went to Yamaha out of spite. He did it because he basically wanted to say to Honda, no, I can win on that bike too. I am that good. And he proved how good he was because he did it immediately. He's the only rider in GP history to win back-to-back races with different manufacturers. That will probably never happen again.
I can actually think of 2 riders that went from one Japanese manufacturer to another just recently, but the problem was if Johan Mir and Alex Rins wanted to stay in the sport, they didn't really have a choice.
They didn't have a choice because Suzuki folded. Yeah, Suzuki, who were finishing out last year as maybe the bike to actually go blow for blow with Ducati on the right kind of track. Well, they just burned the entire fucking program to the ground. With no regard to where people with no regard to where people were going to land.
Never do emission scandals, folks. And I guess there's also Jonathan Ray, but Kawasaki to Yamaha and World Superbikes maybe a little bit different, and also race pace.
And that also kind of feels like a fuck you to Kawasaki because he's been asking Kawasaki to fix their bike for 3 years, and they've just gone backwards.
Yep.
As Hotbrack said, fuck Yamaha and just went to BMW, who are awful in World Superbike.
Hotbrack was like, just, you know what, fuck it, just give me this bread, basically. Like,
Kanan! Oh, here it goes!
Yeah, like he basically said, listen, if I'm going to finish second all the time, at least give me a better paycheck to do it. This is like, in terms of MotoGP, you don't go from Honda to Yamaha or vice versa. You just don't. It's something you just don't do. There's a reason Lynn Jarvis has said on the record he would never sign a Marquez brother ever again. Right? Like, there is beef between those two sides. Alex Rins crossed the battle lines. I like that. I mean, look, if Yamaha even give Alex Rins a morsel, that's the best team in MotoGP, without question. You've got 2 of the 4 best riders in the world, in my opinion. Like, if Marc Marquez leaves Honda, they will never have a better rider lineup in their history ever again. Ever. Because who are you going to get to even give you 5% of what Marc Marquez can do on a MotoGP bike at the highest level?
There's no one there.
Do you think Pedro Acosta wants any of this? Even if
why
they
the hell would Pedro Acosta touch Yamaha when he has KTM wrapped around his fingers?
And KTM is in a much better place as an overall bike compared to anything out of Japan right now. Yeah, this is KTM being a bit down compared to where they were last year.
Yeah, like Pedro Acosta can basically, he holds the cards, I think, in that situation where
he does.
Like, as far as KTM, they have 4 bikes. As far as I can see right now, 3 of them are expendable if you need to get Acosta in. Right. Jack Miller, who we'll touch on later, hasn't been doing jack shit.
Like, maybe there's like Acosta has superstar potential. I have no doubt about that. But he's not, and he knows that too. Like I've read interviews of him. He's a very intelligent man beyond his 18 years. He wouldn't touch Honda with a barge pole right now. Like, he's been promised to KTM, he will take a KTM, and right now KTM is in a far better place to win anything in MotoGP compared to Honda. KTM can still challenge Ducati at their very best right now.
Dani Pedrosa just gave Pecco Bagnaia fits for an entire race.
And an entire sprint.
On a prototype bike that is not fully refined yet.
Carbon fiber. The whole frame was out of carbon fiber. We ain't seen that in a good decade.
And, God.
They're trying. They're trying. Aprilia are probably going to make an all-in play for Fabio Quartararo next year because Aleix Espargaro is likely retiring at the end of 2024. He's openly said this is probably his final contract in the sport.
I mean, look, to circle it back to Honda. End of 22 into 23. Nothing they brought impressed anybody at the test.
No.
They started with the same bike they finished 22 with. Now they've had this test. No one's impressed. Probably going to run the same frame that they have been running. And now we're hearing they're not going to have what is intended for 24 ready at the end of 23. You're in the dumps and you haven't made any development progress basically since Australia last year when they introduced a big update, a big aero update there.
Unacceptable.
The only thing they've brought this year is the aero they're running now, which improves the bike in some places, hurts it in others because they missed the bike on aero. Pun intended. And now they're trying to catch back up.
Japan reckons they're 3 years behind the 8 ball on aero. 3 years. How do you make ground on that?
Well, I know one way that we can make ground on this and level the whole playing field out, but that's an option that MotoGP does not want to take.
The earliest we will likely see that is 2027. Because that's the next major regulation change for MotoGP. So Honda can't afford to wait for 4 years. Most other parties,
know Mark won't.
Mark certainly won't. Marc Marquez is 30 years old. He's entering the back end of his prime as a bike rider now.
It's freaking scary to think about.
Like,
he's been in the sport for a decade.
Yeah, he's done. This is his 10th season in the top flight. He debuted in 2013. This is year 10 for Marc Marquez. He's won world titles in 6 of them. And that was 6 out of the first 7 years he was in the top flight. Like, he's seen Honda when they're bad. He's seen Honda now, and it's even worse. I'm going to put a neat little bow on this by saying Honda needs every resource it can get. It needs to be doing whatever it needs to do to keep Marc Marquez on that bike. You have nothing without Marc Marquez, and unfortunately, Honda are ultimately responsible for being in this mess in the first place, where Marc Marquez was the only person who could ride this bike. You reap what you sow. You've put Marquez on such a pedestal and expected him to bail you out so many times he can no longer do that because you don't know how to develop a bike properly in the aero era of this sport. So you need to get back to Honda, get back to Motegi, beat all your heads together, and figure something out. Because if you don't give him something by the end of the year, he will walk. And you will... And I'm sorry, I respect him greatly as a bike rider. Johann Zarco is not that guy. Taka Nakagami is not that guy. Johan Mir, sadly, with his record at Honda so far, is not that guy.
And forget not finding that replacement guy. If you plug Marc Marquez into a Ducati, God help us all. Even if it's a year old.
Oh, Francesco Bagania said it himself. He wants Marc Marquez on a Ducati because he thinks he can take him on at that level. Everyone in that paddock knows that Marc Marquez is still the best bike rider in the world. Fabio will openly say it. Francesco Bagania will openly say it. They know how good Marc Marquez is. Like, they are sitting at home in the back of their heads and they're probably thinking, thank God Marquez isn't on a competitive bike. Because if it is, we know what he can do with it. He can do more with it than any rider we've ever seen in this sport. Even more than Valentino.
Yeah, these last few years with bad breaks with injuries and bad bikes have cost this young man a chance to really rocket up the record books.
Yeah,
he's merely a clear third in pretty much every statistical category. Second in a bunch of other places.
He should be knocking on the door for first right now.
He should.
Because he's lost 4 years of his prime. There's no getting around that fact. This is not good enough. At the end of the day,
I mean, even without the arm brake, right? I think remove the arm brake, remove the injury in 2020. I still think by 22, Honda's completely out of gas.
We probably would have gotten to this point anyway.
We would have gotten to this point, I think, going into 22 when Pecco finally said to Ducati, no, don't give me more horsepower. Give me more rideable horsepower.
And for once, Ducati actually listened.
Because Ducati listened to their rider.
Yeah. Gigi Dall'Igna's stubbornness cost him at least another 2 more years of Andrea Dovizioso, who was, at the time, the second best rider in the world. They're lucky right now they still have the second best rider in the world under their wing right now. And they're even luckier that number one is incapable of riding at that level at the moment. Put him on a Gresini, danger, is what I would happily say.
I did like the rumor that pretty much came out that Ducati's racing bosses said, we don't want Marquez anywhere near one of our bikes. And then supposedly Ducati's CEO said, run that by me again?
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, we don't want Marc Marquez? Are you on crack?
But he might leave us. But he might leave us sooner or later. We don't care.
Shut the fuck up. Is what they basically said to them. Go sign that man. Ask questions later.
You could sign a string of one race deals for us. I don't give a shit. Put him on our bikes.
I mean,
gentlemen. Okay, we got to talk about a little bit about like the race itself.
We've done 35 minutes without talking about the actual race. That's quite impressive for us.
That's right. Again, Marc Marquez, even after losing 4 years of his prime, still moves the needle like nobody else. But
two things.
Yeah.
First of all, mercifully, we don't have to talk about a mortifying accident this weekend.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Thank God for that. But Jorge Martin, he showed up for this one. He dominated both the sprint and the Misano Grand Prix itself, winning both comfortably ahead of Marco Bezzecchi and his mangled hand, and Francesco Bagania and his mangled shins to finish third in both races, despite barely being able to walk. He was run over by a bike a week ago. What do you guys make of the race itself and the performances within?
I got no context for anything else other than Francesco Bagania is the best rider right now for riding through that and getting 2 podiums out of it. That's a champion's ride.
Oh, like honestly, I would love to know what the inside of a MotoGP medical is like, because for those who don't know, if you're declared unfit at the end of a race weekend, you have to clear a medical on Thursday morning for the next race weekend, so you're signed off as fit to be able to race. Francesco Bagania was run over by Brad Binder 4 days beforehand with multiple contusions on his legs, and he was deemed fit. Do not ask me how. I've got nothing. I've got nothing for you here. I am not a doctor.
That's either a miracle of modern medicine and the human spirit, or just negligence, or it's both.
I'd say a little bit of both.
It's either negligent stupidity or it's the opening scene of Rush. I'm not sure which one it is, personally. But if you know, you know. But it's a weird one for me because, like, okay, it's not wrong choice, but it's not a weird one. What I will say is, if Francesco Bagania goes on to win the championship this year, and there's a good chance he will, because he has been, for me, absolutely the best rider in the sport this year. This is the weekend we'll likely remember for it most. Like, this was, like, to put it into perspective, Bagnaia had to lower the ride height device of his bike just to be able to get off it and walk. And even then, he could barely walk in the first place. He was gingerly walking over to his team to celebrate because he could barely walk on his own power. And he was still incredibly fast all weekend long. And at his best, he was keeping up with Jorge Martin. In fact, he rode, knowing what we know about his injuries, he rode a perfect race. He had the exact game plan in mind. He was, I'm going to throw the full weight of my speed at Martin early and try to overtake him early before my leg gives way. It was a perfect game plan. He wasn't quite able to execute it. He ended up sinking to third in the end because I think the adrenaline wore off about half distance, and I think it took him about 4 or 5 laps to get it back, i.e. to adapt and figure it out from there, because he still had enough pace to keep Dani Pedrosa behind him. And we'll get into more on that in a little bit. But Bagnaia had no business racing this weekend. And any sane person would call you crazy for even attempting that bullshit. Bagnaia left the weekend with 23 points. 16 for the third place. More
than anyone could have asked of him.
Yeah, like that was, and I don't like using this term because, like I said last week, I think we gladiatorialize the persevering nature of this sport sometimes. That was a superhuman performance from Francesco Bagnaia. That was utterly ridiculous. That man's got grit, and he had no business riding like that this weekend, and he was still competitive and as fast as he's been all year. Like, that is, like, if he wins the title this year, you will circle Misano as that Bagnaia weekend. Because some of his performances can be a bit forgettable. Sometimes, his wins can be a bit dull when he's completely ripping seconds out of the field at the front, like we saw in Austria. This one, with the yellow Ducati, beautiful thing, by the way, this is the one. This is the one that people will remember. Because that was a special performance.
I would say so. I mean, you could say that about him. You could say that about Marco Bezzecchi, effectively competing this weekend with one hand.
Right.
Which
his hand was mangled.
I don't know how those two got those bikes on the podium.
If you saw his hand in the press conferences, he has about
I don't want to think about it.
He has like bent fingers, and he's got like half a pound of bandages wrapped around the majority of his hand because he broke it in that. He broke bones in his hand in that Catalunya pileup we had last week, and it kind of went underreported for obvious and understandable reasons. But he still rode through it and was keeping up with Martin for like 3/4 of the races in question. Like, again, like, Bez was phenomenal this weekend. Like, in fact, I would go one further. The top 8 in this race weekend all rode brilliantly in their own way. Like,
yeah, I mean, let's go down the list. I mean, Jorge Martin, flawless.
Perfect.
The kind of weekend that really, like, he should have, because he is an incredibly talented motorcycle rider, and oftentimes tends to throw it away.
His qualifying performance, go out of your way to watch.
It was one of the laps of the year. Marco Bezzecchi, as mentioned. Francesco Bagnaia, as mentioned. Dani Pedrosa.
P4.
Wonderful.
It's like he never left. I can think of a Japanese factory who could really use his veteran experience and know-how in developing a bike. And coincidentally, they just have blue and orange bikes right now.
They've never been the same since he's left.
No.
Dani Pedrosa knows how to... Let me put it to you this way. There is a reason Dani Pedrosa got a pair of standing ovations when he got back to the KTM garage. They love him in that camp. They were throwing him up into the air for finishing 4th. They adore him. Why? Because he's busted his ass to turn KTM into a genuine contender. I mentioned this briefly when we had the Austria episode, because obviously that was KTM's home round. They put a special picture on Twitter of Pedrosa arm in arm with Mika Kallio with the quote, "We couldn't be here if it wasn't for you two." That's how important these two figures are to KTM, because it's their development and their hard work that has been a big reason as to why KTM are the factory that they are. And Pedrosa was running with the reigning world champion at age 38.
He's still that dude.
It's the second oldest rider to ever have a top 4 finish in MotoGP. You could probably guess who the other one is. Give you a hint.
Pretty
He
good
likes
company.
Yellow. He's the only other rider that ever finished in the top 4 at age 38 or higher. It's that's how good Dani Pedrosa is.
Yeah.
That's again insane. Maverick Vinales, maybe the least special of the performers out there, but still top Aprilia in 5th place. Can't ask for much more than that. Again, was very solid. Miguel Oliveira doing very good work on last year's Aprilia as well.
RNF is starting to kind of get their shit back together. It's been a while since that team and indeed its previous form have been featuring up in the top 10 consistently.
Yeah, because
we'll get to the other one in a second, but
because I'll mention it quickly here. Because Raul Fernandez had his best ever MotoGP finish this weekend in 8th as well. First time he's finished with a single digit next to his name, which is a great step in the right direction for him, because he was 10th at Silverstone, and he was 8th here. Was with Luca Marini and Marc Marquez towards the end of that race, which is the most promising Fernandez has looked since joining the top flight 2 years ago. So hopefully that's a sign that Raul was progressing in the right direction, because we saw him in Moto2. We know how much of a demon that man can be.
We know that he is better than what has been shown so far.
100%.
It is a crying friggin' shame.
Insane. He had the single greatest rookie Moto2 season of all time. We know this boy is special when he wants to be. And he needs the right environment to make it work. But Raul Fernandez is mad fast, and I'm glad. I
don't think it's hard to get a better environment than what we were seeing at Tech 3 in previous times.
Mixed bag on that one, depending on who you ask.
Marc Marquez, P7, who
that's insane.
Again, folding that bike into knots, trying to get it to go around corners.
The benchmark for Honda was you are finishing last and second to last.
Yeah. That's
replacement level riding on a Honda. Marc Marquez finished 7th.
It's Lonnie Smith's 1989 if you've seen the John Boyce video. That's how special that performance. Even the more cynical journos and fans I've seen on Twitter are all no, Marquez was fucking class today. They know that bike is a pile of shit. And Marquez was running with the best bike in the sport with the Ducatis and the Aprilia, which we know is a very fast bike. Probably the second best bike in the sport right now.
Wonders may cease.
Yeah. God damn it. The top 8 can all hang their heads high on this one. That was quality riding from the entire top 8. The issue is that because Misano is one of the most technical tracks we go to on the MotoGP calendar, it was a dirty air fest. And as a result of that, we didn't get an awful lot of overtaking, which is a shame, because
very processional.
It was a boring race. There's no getting around it. We had some early the first half was full of tension with Bagania trying everything in his power to try and pass Martin.
But that's what we've seen a lot, Dre.
Yeah,
haven't we? It's we get a lot of tension races in the first 4 or 5 laps throughout the field, and then the tires just they melt down, and then everyone spreads out.
Aleix Espargaro I think, had a great quote to sum this situation up, and it reminded me a lot of peak Formula One, and I'll quickly find it here on the website, and I'll say it again. Quote, this is relation after the race. He said, "Quote: In this circuit, it's two things. You overtake like Binder yesterday, which if you saw him in the sprint, my man was making shapes trying to pass people. He was ultra aggressive in trying to make gains. It was like all the overtakes were on the limit, but good, very good overtakes. It was very impressive to watch because it's so difficult to do what he did. But you overtake in that way or it's impossible to overtake. Quote, for example, the last 3 laps I was riding 33.0 and Marini was coming doing 32 lows, 31.9. I saw the papers now to put it into perspective. The all-time race lap record fell in this race. It was a 31.7, I think, from Jorge Martin during this race. Like, 31.9 is about as fast as you get as a MotoGP bike around Misano. So
you're at the limit of the physics of the tires at that point. Yeah,
Marini was going a second a lap faster. And he was just like, I just defended, and it was impossible for him to overtake me. So yeah, in the end with the aero, these will be the rules until 2027, so we need to keep going. They did it. They allowed to do it. So everyone is going that way. End quote.
Trey, do you remember, it was the Pandemic 500, it was the 2020 race, the Indy 500, where it was pretty much the same. Like, you could pass for 2 or 3 laps if you just hung it around the outside of someone, and then the tires would die and everyone would just spread out. Because exactly what we keep seeing in MotoGP.
Because you can't run a 500 in August. It's just too hot. Like, everybody...
You can't
the
run
plan
motorcycles.
was not originally to run the 500 in August, but I don't know if you heard, but something happened.
Something about a Mexican beer.
Something about a Japanese exclusive Toyota sedan.
Oh my god!
Stop!
That's a better reference. But it's the same thing. It's like the tires just cannot handle what these bikes are putting them through, and even if they could, you've got so little contact patch. If you try to go for a Hail Mary late braking maneuver and you get caught in someone's slipstream, you effectively stall your brakes and you just crash.
Right. And it's something that's been mentioned repeatedly in the last year and a half, but it's only making more and more noise. He doesn't need any recommendation from me, but if you've not read Matt Oxley's latest piece about this on motorsportmagazine.com, I highly recommend you do. He goes into a lot of detail about... Like, look, Matt Oxley has raced in the Isle of Man TT. If he is coming out and saying that this sport might be too dangerous at this point, shut the fuck up and listen to what he has to say. Because
he's done it. He's done it at the limit.
He's done it at the very human limit of what is deemed safe in motorsport. It doesn't get more dangerous than the Isle of Man TT in any context, in any other form of motorsport that we do here. Like, so if Oxley's coming out and saying that, we have a problem. We have a big problem. And this sports product is not in a good way. The top 6, for all the impressive performances of its rides, had 3 overtakes in it over the course of the race.
Is that good?
You can't sit there and tell me that's entertaining. I mean... Quick side note before we get out of here as well, because I want to talk a little bit about KTM again here, and Dani Pedrosa again, glowingly, 4th place with the sprint in the race. And by the way, more points than Marc Marquez this year. Dani Pedrosa off 2 weekends of riding.
Again, Honda could really use a rider like that.
Yeah.
You know that never happened while they were teammates?
No in a million years, and yet here we are. If you've noticed, Jack Miller is badly out of form right now.
He's on the struggle bus.
Like, it seems that they've done some tweaking to that KTM lately, and Jack has not liked it. And it's not gone over well. He's struggled, I'd argue, since the summer break. Maybe not all on him. Silverstone, he was kind of taken out a little bit. That was a bit harsh because I think Miller was bad. And this race, to a degree, again, a bit harsh. But Katie Pirro, the only cop we like around here, speared him, which wasn't ideal. luckily everybody involved was okay. It was a nasty spill in real time to look at. But Jack Miller is 10th in the championship right now. He is sitting, and I'm doing the math in my head really quickly here, 69, not nice, points behind Brad Binder in the standings. Like, is Miller putting himself in genuine trouble here? Because we mentioned it before. Pedro Acosta has been promised to KTM. We don't know what color it's going to be yet.
It's not good, is it?
It's not great.
I think you mentioned it. Like, no one has been doing less with more than Jack over really the last 4 or 5 months. I mean,
he hasn't been on a feature podium since the first Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the qualifying is still okay more often than not, but he's just falling like a rock in races. In race trim is just melting his tires, and the KTM is already a bit of a tire muncher still.
It's a very slidey bike.
It is a slidey bike. I mean, you mentioned Brad Binder making shapes. He was making shapes. The bike was making shapes. And his tires were making shapes. Now is not the time for Jack Miller to crater in form when they have a clear rider dilemma about where Acosta's going to end up. Because all they need to do, I mean, given that Gas is just a second factory KTM team at this point, they can just shuffle people around if they need to.
I don't think we're at the point yet where they need to seriously consider moving Jack on. Like, Jack, I think people are very quick to make these sorts of assessments. However, he's not doing himself any favors. Like, even before the incident here at Misano, he was awful all weekend. And look, maybe it's the nervousness about his personal life, because for those who don't know, his wife's due to give birth literally tomorrow at the time of recording. So,
congrats.
Hopefully, by the time this goes out, everybody's out and everybody's safe, hopefully. Fingers crossed, because we do like Jack. And fatherhood is a big deal. I'd be nervous thinking about that too, when you're taking Ruby everywhere as partner. But boy, like, this is a bad time for you to lose form. Like KTM has already got a headache. It's a very Alpha Tauri sort of situation where they've got 3 riders into 2 spots. We know Acosta's going to get one of them, but they've like Augusto Fernandez is giving KTM a genuine headache here, because Pol Espargaro has been injured, he's come back hurt, and he's still nowhere near 100% yet. And Fernandez had scored points in every MotoGP race this season until this weekend, where Morbidelli beat him to keep his own scoring points in every race streak alive this year. They were the only 2 guys that have done it all year, and Morbidelli kept his alive by finishing 15th this weekend. This sport works in strange and mysterious ways. So I think we need to be a bit careful before jumping to conclusions, but I do find it a little bit concerning that Jack Miller is currently on for his worst MotoGP season since 2018. Like, he's been in the top 8 every year since then. In fact, he actually was constantly getting better year on year in his time with Ducati as well. And he's gone to KTM, and the upside, even for his time at Ducati, is not there anymore. Like, last year, you forget, he had 8 podium finishes in that Ducati. 8! He has 1 this year. He won a race last year. On merit, he dominated the Japanese Grand Prix last year.
Yeah, we finished up in Motegi last year, and we thought, well, where the hell was that all season?
Right.
But Binder is just blowing him out of the water this season.
It doesn't help that Binder's having a career year. Binder is sitting 4th right now. He's on for his best. Like, he's been a top 6 guy before. Binder's on for his best ever MotoGP season. He's in a clear 4th place at the moment. 13 points ahead of Aleix Espargaro, who was a title contender through 3/4 of last season. Johan Zarco, one of the most consistent riders in MotoGP, is 26 points behind him. Luca Marini's having his best year in MotoGP, still comfortably 7th. Like, way better than Maverick Vinales, way better than Alex Marquez. These are quality riders Binder is in front of at the moment. Like, Jack's got to step up. And like, KTM are slipping compared to last year. Like, Aprilia are starting to reel them in that fight for second in the manufacturers. They're 16 points behind right now. They got to be careful because Aprilia has been the hot hand since the summer break. I
tend to wonder in the order of the bikes. I mean, I feel like, I think I mentioned this on last week's show, it feels like KTM are a definitive third best when Aprilia, like now that Aprilia is starting to kind of get some momentum, it's just Binder keeping them afloat. And unfortunately, in this race, Binder crashed out from fourth and was furious to have done so.
Binder's title hopes are like, he's got 11 points the last 2 rounds. That's time.
Yeah, he did well to get back in the points after the crash. He's still finishing 14th. Like, it's like, that says a lot about the grit of Brad Binder, but he's not going to be winning the championship this year. Not a chance.
I don't think that was ever on the cards, really.
No, and he's been the best non-Ducati, which is worth something in this sport right now.
By a mile and a stretch.
Yeah, but he's got a lace reel in him in. So he's got to be careful about that. Like, he's got to be careful about that. I don't think we're at the point with Miller where we've got to talk about cutting him all together for Pedro Acosta. Like, Acosta will end up on one of these 3 bikes. No question. I don't think it's for Jack. I still think they're going to tell Augusto to go down to Moto2 again for a year or become a test rider. It's rough, but we'll have to wait and see how we go.
Right.
Let's get out of here. MotoGP was a very interesting procession, and hopefully we don't say that about the next round in India.
What is the next round, by the way? Because from what I understand, it could either be this weekend or it could be the weekend after next, depending on what is set on Thursday.
Yeah, there is a riders' meeting on Thursday between the top flight. Like, we are meant to be going to the Buddha International Circuit for the first
Vetteldrome.
The Vetteldrome for the first Indian Grand Prix on September 24th. There is genuine safety concerns about that track on bikes. And the circuit has not been homologated yet, and apparently it won't be until next Thursday.
Well, when do they race?
That weekend.
Is that good?
MotoGP.
What the fuck are you doing? Like, I'm sorry. No matter which way you slice it, it is not a good sign that you are homologating a Grand Prix for Grand Prix level motorcycle racing with the most powerful and dangerous bikes we've ever had in the sport on the weekend you're racing. I have a strong inkling they'll be going to Buddha, but they will not be going for an Indian Grand Prix. You heard it here first. We'll have to wait and see. If it doesn't happen, we'll let you know about it.
And then the next race would be October 1st at Mobility Resort Bezzecchi.
Yep, that round. Which could be a very critical round pertaining to Marc Marquez's future, because we all know that is Honda's home ground. The big Honda will be down there that weekend. Words will likely be exchanged. We'll have to wait and see. But we'll see what happens when we get there. MotoGP will be back maybe next weekend in India. We'll talk about it then. But until...
We can guarantee it will be back at least before October 1st.
Yeah, we'll see. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. They've been RJ O'Connell and Cam Buckley. Until next time, thank you very much for listening. Sayonara.
Later, y'all.
Wonder if Harley Davidson would pick up Marc Marquez.